Ifa, either through Lukumi or Isheshe tradition. I specifically um, follow the Lukumi tradition. And so, as a practitioner, I have spaces dedicated in my home where I pray for me, and following my Ori, but as well as specific Orisha, which are natural divine entities connected, I like to say, as soldiers of God or Oludumare. And together, I connect with them to just move my life forward and connect with what my divine purpose is here on earth.
I love that. And I'm hearing a lot of divine, divine, divine with that explanation. Tell me in your own words, what does divine mean when you say it? What does it mean?
All encompassing magnetic power, above how we understand it as the earthly realm. You know, when we say divine, it is in the most guided possible way, in spirituality, higher beings, majestical powers, just the all encompassing the higher order of things.
Okay. Okay. Now, I know that there are a lot of these type of traditions practiced in the Caribbean. Where exactly are you from in the Caribbean, and what is like common there?
Sure. So my family's from Guyana. Other parts, but mainly Guyana. And the main practice in Guyana is what's called obia.
Okay.
Um, I don't practice obia, but that's one of the main practices there. There are forms of Christianity that connects to African undertone, but one of the main practices in Guyana is obia, as well as Jehovah's Witness and Christianity.
So, did your was your mother and or father in the Jehovah's Witness upbringing, or
So my dad more so grew up in church per se. It started off as Christian. My great grandparents started a church in Guyana, and then my father, of course, was forced to go. As he grew older, my grandfather converted into Jehovah's Witness, and my father was like, "All right, y'all, I'm gonna head out because this ain't for me." Um, and
wait a
so,
second, slow down. You said
okay.
your great great grandparents started a church.
My great grandfather, yeah, Charles
Your
Pickering.
great grandfather started a church in Guyana,
Yeah,
and this was a. Mhm,
he migrated from Barbados, him and my
okay.
grandmother,
Hmm.
one as an adult, one as a child, and they came over to Guyana, and then they started a church in Guyana, in Georgetown.
Wow. Okay, and this church was not Jehovah's
Christian.
Witness.
No.
Okay. What kind of Christianity, if you can remember,
I don't remember specifically what it is.
okay.
I think for me it was just taking in that family started a whole church, you know. That was like, okay, so my connection with spirituality runs deep in any way I cut it.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah,
mhm. And so from the church that they started, they were obviously pastors and first lady of that church.
correct.
And this is your father's parents.
Yeah, my father's grandparents.
Okay, your father's grandparents. Okay, got it.
Yes.
So then he was raised in that same church.
Yes, he was.
Oh,
Up until
okay.
about 11, 12 years old.
Okay. And then what happened when he
Yeah.
was at 11, 12?
My grandfather converted to Jehovah's Witness. And as my father became a teenager, he was like, "Yeah, no, I'm a head out. This is not for me."
Why? What was the what is what was his gripe with Jehovah's Witnesses?
he couldn't celebrate holidays. He could, there was a
Mm,
lot celebrate birthdays, and my father was like, "I'm not with that. I want to be celebrated. I want to. You can't raise me on all of these traditions, and then all of a sudden tell me you're not participating in any of them. Absolutely not."
yeah. 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 So at a certain point, he moved into his own, um, I guess, expression of
Right,
religion. Mm-hmm.
right. Did he go to church? Not that I know of on special holidays. My father does he have gifts? Yeah, but he does not follow up with them. He's not a super religious person at all, and I think it has a lot to do with being forced to go as a child. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as an adult, he did not exercise his freedom to express religion as he wanted to. He just chose not to participate heavily in it at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so tell me about your mother. Was her family in the clergy as well?
No, so I recently learned that my great grandfather um, was what is called a Rosicrucianist actually. And that is an ancient philosopher, healer, practice where it's all male and the highest intelligent people are also like the village healers. Um, and he practiced that, but he didn't have any immediate boy children to pass it on to. So my grandfather wasn't interested in it, so it kind of went with him. Now, does my mom's family believe in God? Absolutely, but they're more into the herbal practices. Nothing formal, but the spirituality is there. But there was nothing formal that I remember anybody doing or going through. Um, but ironically enough, I grew up going to Catholic school, so. Um, my mom made sure that we were all baptized in an Anglican church. Um, and I always had a yearning for going to church, but it was never forced upon by my parents or encouraged or, denied. It was something I wanted to do and they let me do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you mentioned that your mom sent you to a Catholic church and that you had been baptized. What did you learn about religion from your mother? And then what did you see her do? What was her form of expression?
Oh, so my foundation is Catholicism, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
spent my entire life in Catholic school. But I
Mm-hmm.
saw my mom light candles, um, the Psalms. All of us had the Psalms open under our pillows. I still do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Keeps the Bible on hand. So she does things like she has a corner where she dedicates the candles and stuff. I would even call it an altar. She doesn't acknowledge it as one, but I do because
Mm-hmm.
I am further along in my practices. So she does certain things. She keeps certain things in the house. She keeps incense. She keeps um, frankincense and myrrh in the house. Um, she will smoke the house out. Um, mop the floor a certain way. So there's things that she does and certain prayers that she aligns to, but I don't know her to like formally get dressed and say, "Hey y'all, we are all going to church." That was never a
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm. 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 So growing up, you weren't like forced into church on Sunday or mass on Sunday. It was
No.
just you had to have that foundation through the Catholic school that you went through.
Right. I had to have the discipline and the structure that came from it. And
Mhm.
ironically enough, that's where I learned a lot of my psalms and a lot of my, the original prayers was in
Right,
Catholic school, right?
right, right.
And it did create an appetite for me to learn spirituality as a whole. And
Mhm.
what else is there besides Catholicism?
Mhm.
Catholicism wasn't for me, right?
Mhm. Why not?
Because it's dry. I need to feel a little something. Out of maybe 10 songs that we had to sing, two of them I might have been excited to sing, and when their responses, they're singing it, I'm like, baby, get me out of
Yeah.
here. But it's in my veins. There are prayers
Mhm.
that if you started, I could finish it to this day.
Mhm. 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 What do you think the point is of Catholicism? And when I'm asking you what the point, like um I know you're going to understand me when I'm asking you that, but just now that you have gone through this full circle journey and you can sit on this other side and turn around and look at it, what do you think the point of it is? What's the point of it?
In general or in my life?
We can do both. Let's do in general and then let's do for you.
Um, I think in general, Catholicism is supposed to, I guess, set a stage of one of ideally it's supposed to set like if there were like a big three, Catholicism would be one of the big threes, right? To kind of set the stage on how you're supposed to think about God's creation and His story, but even larger focus on Jesus and how He came to be and what His contribution to the world is and what He did for us. Me personally, Catholicism let me know um, how structured a religion can be, how formal a religion can be. For me, it was the foundation, and then I didn't always compare it to what I grew up with, but it helped me be able to learn about other cultures because there were things that were similar, but there are things that were different. And I was able to say, oh, okay, this works for me.
Mhm.
This doesn't work for me. Oh, I know this prayer. Oh, they do it different. So it had something for me to make reference to as opposed to starting with like a completely clean slate.
Mhm.
And more than anything, that's common with any religion, any practice, any spirituality is discipline and
Mhm.
being consistent with your connection to spirit, no matter who you identify as. My foundation and understanding that started in elementary school.
Mhm. Now, I hear a lot of reference to spirit in Catholicism, and it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, particularly because I'm not Catholic. I never really, like I never really got into it. I've been to mass before and been to some of the prayers, but I would say, I agree with what you said earlier. It's dry, and dry for me means it's kind of lacking the spiritual element. It's lacking the seasoning of divinity. And so I am I'm intrigued by that because I wonder where the overlap would be from what you got out of Catholicism and where you ended up as an Orisha practitioner. What, like, how, let's connect some of those dots.
So, some of the connections there, right? In Catholicism, we pray to a lot of saints, right? Saint Barbara, Saint Gabriel, Saint Michael. Um, However, those are in African spirituality, those are covert names for some of this very same Orisha that people are denouncing. And that's because they had to kind of blend it in. You start with voodoo in Benin, and it comes over and has morphed into different things as it has come over. But voodoo is one of the main practices that has a lot of Catholicism in it, and
Mhm.
it's associated with the very saints that the Catholics are praying to.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
for me, it's like y'all don't even know you still praying to Eshu. But if you feel like
Mhm.
you're not, okay, then what can I tell you? Yes, you're still praying to Shango and Saint Lazarus, if that's is Saint Anthony or whichever saint you identify with. There is an African spiritual, an African deity, an African entity connected to that, and
Mhm.
so there is the idea of you're only praying to God, but you're also lighting candles. Do you go to the church? There's a whole section just for you to kneel and pray and light
Mhm.
candles,
Mhm.
right? And so,
Tell me more about that, because I was very shocked. Imagine my shock as a grown person walking in and seeing an altar in a
yeah,
Catholic church. I was
a
shocked because
huge,
the whole time I thought, no, no altars, no rituals, no
now,
etc.
not only are the altars, right? There are altar children, most of the time altar boys, but there are altar children who also help maintain the altar, and there's a formalization around how you interact with the altar. When you go in front of the altar, you have to kneel, right?
Mm,
When you go in front of the priest, you have to like bow, right? So we do ballet, but you still have to bow, right? Um, if you have a special prayer, if you have special things that you're working on, you still go to church to this corner that's this dedicated to candles, and you still have to go in there and light the candle or turn on the candle, acknowledge which specific saint you might be praying to, for what specific thing you are praying for whomever. You might do a petition, right, and slip it under the candle. So a lot of those things are very much similar to the practices that I practice now.
wow, that's a whole nother dissertation, Candace, actually. Because yeah, I didn't know any of that. And I don't I guess it's such a beautiful advantage to have this insight into Catholicism and to be able to show the overlap and show how so many of the same things that you're doing right now, these practices are have been adopted into this religious system. I'm also curious on the flip side, when we talk about the word religion, do you consider Ifa to be a religion, or do you consider it to be a spiritual technology or practice or something else? Because I'm worried about I'm curious about the word religion as to how you see it.
um I think if I'm being fully transparent, I'm still navigating that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge Ifa as my spirituality, right? But I think I'm still debunking um, religion because I've grown to resent that word, only because when people use it, they weaponize it and they use it as this like big bully word, right? And I have strayed, or I've veered off to the left. And so I do recognize it as a religion, right? But I don't speak to it as this is my religion. This is my form of spirituality. This is how I connect with source. Um, and so maybe there'll be one day where I can reconcile and be able to say, no, Ifa is my religion, right?
Right, right.
But right now, I'm as I deepen my relationship with Ifa and I connect even deeper, I think I'm enjoying being able to say, this is my spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Um, you use the word weaponize when it comes to
Mhm.
religion. Tell me about some of any instances of that in your personal life, be it in upbringing with childhood or just as you've gone along into your journey.
So when I was younger, it wasn't necessarily weaponized, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, Even though my parents didn't force me to go to church, I I felt like I needed to go to church. I loved community, especially when like the family grandmother was still alive, A lot of the spirituals that I know are from being in church.
Mhm.
And then I went off to college and I went to St. John's, but that was still Catholicism. And I'm like, baby, this is still not gonna cut the mustard.
Mhm.
Um, and so I went to Greater Allen out in Queens, and I would bring people with me, whatever. It didn't matter what I was doing Saturday night. I would get up and go to church, but I still didn't move. I didn't feel moved to join the church because there was like maybe an unspoken intimidation factor, right?
Mm, mhm.
And then I had my daughter, and I started going to St. Matthew's, but there was still like this very big church feeling, and it's like this is too much. And then I
Mm,
started going to smaller churches, and when I started going to smaller churches, that's really when things started to get weird, um, because people would place this demand on me in terms of how I connect with church. There was a
mm,
there was a recognition that there was something different about me,
mhm.
and there was like a maybe the only word I have to describe is like a desperation for me to like fall in line with this
Mhm, mhm,
bigger than life spirituality path.
mhm,
In that time, I came across spiritual Baptists. I came across big preachers, and um, the instance in those moments where you have to stop everything that you're doing. You have to give up partying. You have to give up drinking. You can't do this. You can't do that. And as a
okay.
young 20s young lady, I don't want to hear that. And also, why are you telling me this? You can't tell me what to do. Um, and if it wasn't that, it was this weird. Um, when I ran into male pastors, I could be coming to church in a t-shirt and sweats, and it would still like make me uncomfortable with the way that they approach me, and I just didn't like
Mm,
that because I
mhm,
in my day to day, I was already navigating um, men being overly expressive in how they felt and how I presented and what I looked like. So
mhm.
I did not want to go to church and have to deal with that also.
Right.
So after like one incident with the church where the pastor like wanted to talk to me and would like cover it under, I wanted to talk about your spiritual blessings, and then when we get on FaceTime, he would like have no shirt on. I was like, yeah, I'm good off of this. Um, and I didn't say anything to anybody. I just quietly backed away, and some people um, picked up on my distance, and they're like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, that's not really for me to tell, but this is just not for me. And for a long time, I did not go to anybody's church at all, because
Mm,
I didn't like the hypocrisy. I didn't like the blatant hypocrisy. I didn't like people begging and demanding me for my money, making it feel like if I don't give it to them, my whole life is going to go up in smoke and flames. At that time, I didn't understand the purpose of tithing. Um, it didn't feel good. But also in that time, I started to develop more dreams. I started to uh, learn more about Orisha. I started to um, find myself wanted to get up earlier in the morning and pray. And that's at that time, that's when I came across, I started my spirituality journey right around that time. I started meditating, and then meditation led to some really out of body experiences.
mhm,
And from there, I started my journey into African spirituality. But you know what the funny thing is? Even though I am like waist deep in African spirituality, in my divinations and in my moments of growth, I'm still being called back to Christianity because
mm,
my ancestors are like, we are okay with you connecting with African spirituality. However, we still want you to be connected to the church because that's our foundation too, and you're
mm.
representing both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in this weird place where I still have to go to church to help connect with my ancestors, just so that they feel seen. And it doesn't have to be every week, or
Yeah.
every month, but
Yeah.
to help them feel connected to the process. That's how I honor them, right? And this is really about being obedient, which is something
Mm-hmm.
that I probably struggle with in my young 20s anyway. So um, it it morphed from it being about me a little bit, because I'm not the stone that the builder refused. I feel like I'm the stone that the builder chose. And so um, to answer your question, some of those earlier experiences definitely kind of impacted my journey with Christianity, with the church as a whole. Um, so I am, I wouldn't say I'm grateful for those experiences, but I understand why they happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that I could be pushed out of my safety zone and pushed to explore other areas, which led me to where I am now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I
There's
just hit
at
you with a
least
lot.
like there's at least 17 questions that I have just from that. Just from that, because I understand all of it. And there are questions that I have about how you feel about um going to church, being in that environment. Like, what does that feel like for you as someone who has stepped into this indigenous arena, coming back and stepping into a structured religiosity? How does that feel? But also wanting to go more into some of the things that you said about tithing. You said, I didn't understand tithing then. Does that mean that you understand it differently now?
Yes.
Okay. And so what, tell me more about that as well.
So um, I feel I feel like I'm a covert agent going to church now, right? Um, I think I get to connect with God in one way, right? And then I get to go back to my connection outside of that. Sometimes it feels weird, and sometimes I find myself looking at the preacher like, "Sir, what are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
But also, um, it gives me opportunities to challenge my train of thought, to see if there are still connections that make sense to me, get clarification of the things that didn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't have the pressure of trying to be this super mega star church member. I can just show up, and if I have the option, go to church, go to church, go online, go online. If I don't, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Without this compelling push to be all up in the church's crevices, I don't feel that pressure to do that, and I feel good that my ancestors chose me to honor them in that way,
Where was
because
that pressure coming from before?
just because people recognize my leadership, right? And they
Mm,
recognize that I have a lot to offer and to bring to the table. And so they're like, oh,
mm,
we need you on this committee. We need you on that committee. Oh, I would come up with
mm,
an idea and it was like, they'd be like, thank you for volunteering to do that. And absolutely not. I keep my ideas to myself. Um, or I make it that's for you to pass on to the people who actually execute the ideas. I'm not here to do that. And I feel fortified in being able to like draw a line in the sand and say, no, no, that's not what I'm here for. And
yeah.
I feel even more empowered to share with the pastor, like, I'm not here for the reason that you think I'm here. I'm here
Mhm,
because I'm being asked to be here to honor my ancestors. And that's not for you to understand, but that's for you to know and
mhm,
recognize.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Okay.
Um,
So,
you asked me about tithing.
yes.
Um, so the way that my brain processes tithing is that is Christianity's way of giving offerings,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
showing gratitude for the blessings in your life, and to kind of um, sow a seed of faith, because very transparently. If you don't pay no, if you don't tithe, if you don't offer, the church don't have no money, and the church can't do half the things that they want to do, right? And if it's a great church, then you see what your money is going to.
Mhm.
And in this church particularly, you can see it. They offer scholarships. They have events all the time. They have pantries open on Saturdays, breaking bread.
Mm.
um they feed the community. They have events, so many events that are free, so you see where your money is going.
Mhm.
If you have something going on personally and you're running into hard times, within reason, they'll figure out a way to help you. If you have a close family member that passed away, they give you an envelope with a little money in it and send
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
sandwiches to the family. So it's really a community setup, right? um
Mhm.
they do things, and they're generous, and they provide a beautiful foundation for you. You can't go to the pastor if you need support, or any of the other clergy people. And I think that's when you're going to a church and things are running well.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when you're tithing, and you're giving offerings, you're planting a seed, and you are um, showing, that's a form of showing gratitude, to say, hey, thank you for blessing upon me, right? When I grew up, it I guess the way I see it is like, growing up with my parents, my first job, I would buy like a loaf of bread to contribute to the house, right? Out of my first check, you would do a little something to give, just to show
Mhm.
gratitude, right? And that's to plant
Mhm.
your seed to like keep the blessings going. In Ifa and Arisha, you're always giving offerings, right? Money, food, otherwise. And so for me, I'm like, to be honest, if I could give a couple dollars on a Sunday, that's light work compared to what I signed up to do now. So um it's just showing a way of showing gratitude, of saying thank you for blessing me. Here's me planting a seed so that my blessings can keep growing.
I love that. That's a really solid explanation. It's the first time I've ever heard any kind of explanation that resonates or makes sense in any kind of way about tithes. Because, I
Right.
my
We
experience.
see some crazy things over the years. I think I've just been fortunate to find a church that shows me that how it's supposed to be used and what it
Mhm.
looks like when you're using it properly.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for that. And I
Yeah.
also, because of my practice, I was able to divine and confirm that that's what I was supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just say, I kind of like it, let me go. I'm like, hey y'all. So we've been going here for a while. Do you want me to join, or do you want me to just stay on the side and go every once in a while? And they were like, no, join. And I'm like, all right, well, how much of this am I supposed to commit to? And now I have
Who is
I,
they?
my ancestors, because
Okay.
I have a space dedicated to them. And so, and I
Okay.
have tools that I use to interact with them, and they confirm yes or no, or girl, sit down, don't, let's skip all of that, you know.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I try not to do anything um without confirmation from my spiritual team first.
Got it. Got it. Now, let's talk a little bit about that more. I know we talked a lot about Christianity. Let's talk about this ancestral stuff. How did you become introduced to any of this? Like,
Man.
tell me about, like, I don't have a good visual yet of your journey away from Christianity into this
So
side.
Okay, I'm gonna try and sum this up
Don't sum it up. Give
as
me the
um so in one of the smaller churches that I joined, they had a transformation of the mind for women for like 8 weeks, right? And one of the deacons, she was also a spiritual Baptist from Trinidad. And um she saw it all over me, right? And but I didn't know. I knew there was something, but I didn't know what everybody was seeing. I just knew I had to protect it. And so I would go every week, and it would be some beautiful things. And then eventually I started to go with her to her church, which was like big spiritual Baptist bells in these all white outfits. And I'm like, oh, I like this. And at the same time, I started meditating with one of my meditation teachers in the park. So all of these things are happening at the same time.
Okay,
Um,
pause. Wait, pause. Let's back
yes.
up a little bit.
Uh-huh.
How did you even enter the world of meditation? I see. I feel like you're telling me the story, but you're not telling me the story.
Okay. So my cousin posted on Facebook one day. She was like, "Y'all, I gotta tell you about this meditation teacher. He is so awesome, blah, 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 you know. Um, his name is Docs. He does it in the park, up in the mountains. Y'all need to come." And at that time, I was going through it. I was going through a crazy breakup. I was battling so many inner conflicts, and I was just like, I need something because something was picking up. I just didn't know what it was. And I drove up to the mountains, got there, and immediately it was like we were talking, but our souls were talking. And this was freaking me out because, it's one thing for me to experience all of this by myself. It is something completely different for somebody else to see it and experience it with you and acknowledge it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And we went deep into the reservation, and we're sitting there and we're deep in meditation, and my eyes is closed, and then I hear him in my head talking to me. So I open my eyes and I'm like, nobody else heard that? No. Oh. So he smirked, right? But he's still in deep. And I closed my eyes back like, oh, okay, well, I'm not gonna cause a scene. I'm gonna just sit here and go back to this meditation, because apparently that's what we're doing now. And when I
Okay.
really came out of the meditation, he didn't even wait for me to say something. He was like, "You weren't bugging. That really happened." And I was like, "Oh, okay,
I have
all
another
right,
question, please,
yes."
because okay. So this is, I'm glad we're having this conversation because if I have to tell the story, my story is gonna look very strange because my story is gonna look like once upon a time, sis went to Catholic school her whole life, and then boom, she had a bad breakup, and then boom, she started meditating, and then boom, she boom, like it's like did it just it did what there was no lead up to this?
And
And
so
what,
I think
tell me
I
about
started.
the mentality. Like, how
I
is your mind
started.
even open enough to do meditation?
So, I started going, but all of these things are happening at the same time, right? So
Mm,
I'm having these experiences with the spiritual Baptist, and I'm like, this is really extreme, right? But I like what I see here, right? So I start looking up spiritual baptism, trying to understand it more. And that's my first time I get exposed to Orisha at all, right? At the same time, my dreams are like flooding through the gates. It's to the point where I'm dreaming something about someone, and I'm waking up to call them, and that person is calling me to tell me what's happening, and what's happening is what I was dreaming, right? So it was like all of this is like a metamorphosis is happening at the same time, but also, right? I'm trying to get a hold on all of this because it's overwhelming. And as I'm looking for answers, this message on Facebook pops up. And so I'm like, okay, well, I got to try something, right? And so in me trying something, I try this. And so I start doing one-on-one sessions with my meditation teacher, Docs, who's now Brick City Buddha, big um spiritual personality right now. But this is in his early days. When we just meeting up in the park and we started doing one-on-one sessions, and he would come to my apartment and we would meditate, and I would start astroplaning in the sessions. So there would be times where he would come back and he would have to wait until I came back because we would go so deep and I would be so open that I would be somewhere else, right? And then I started having dreams where I was watching things happen, but I was outside of my body watching these things happen. So I'm like, okay, something about this I probably need to dig into a little bit deeper, right? Now, meanwhile, while all of this is happening, I'm going through this complicated relationship, which that person is the person who was just like, there's going to come a day where you and I can't speak because you're going to be further than me. And I'm going to be okay with it. But I didn't want to hear that at the time, right? Because he saw the metamorphosis happening. Um, and there was nothing that we could do about it. It was happening. So we broke up. I started meditating. I'm going through all these things. And one day, there's a mutual friend who, from day one, we connected with spirituality. And I just called him. And I was like, hey, what's the store that you go to for your candles? And he laughed and he said, now you're asking the right questions. I said, what that's supposed to mean? He was like, I was waiting for you, but I couldn't tell you. I had to wait for you to come. And I was like, so you were just watching me drown? And he was like, I knew you would save yourself. So he told me this place to go to. He's like, there's this little Guyanese lady in this store on this street. Just go in there and ask for what you want. She'll help you. And I said, okay. I pull up. I pull up outside. And I'm like, all right, God, you know this is above me. But if this is what you want me to do, if this is the path that you want me to follow, this is different than anything that you showed me thus far. But if this is what you want me to do, I won't question it. I will follow it. But I need you to be bold with your sign. Cross the street, go into the store, the door opens, ring-a-ling-a-ling. And the lady at the behind the counter turns around and it's my godmother.
You mean your real life godmother?
My real life godmother.
Oh my gosh. Your godmother
Yeah.
was in it the whole time?
It's my godmother in the Botanica. And I'm like, Annie? And she's like, Candace? And I said, what are you doing here? And she's like, I work here. What are you doing here?
Wow.
I guess I'm gonna find out. Right? And so then I explained to her what's going on. She said, okay, well, you need to meet with my spiritual mother. So I meet with her spiritual mother, and she's just like, okay, well, this relationship is on the verge of ending. I can help you not end it. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna let it go. I don't want to work nothing, do nothing. Let his natural course take happening. And she was just like, well, you know, you have some spirit guides walking with you. You have these saints walking with you, and you have Yemaya walking with you. And I said, who? Yema who? And she said, Yemaya. So now I'm like in a manic deep dive trying to understand who Yemaya is. And that's when I start learning about all the Orishas, right? But I'm still not quite there. So in the midst of all of this, I come across Sacred Woman. And how I come across Sacred Woman is, of course, I say something out loud and it shows up in front of me. Erica Badu and Queen Afua were doing a live. and they were just talking about Sacred Woman, and I'm just like, well, if Erica did it, is it really that bad? And then Queen has everybody get on a call, and she's talking about it, and I'm feeling invigorated, and so on and so forth. But the course is $1,200, and then I saw that my meditation teacher's girlfriend at the time, she did the program. So I'm like,
Mm.
okay, let me look into this.
Mhm.
So I get
Mhm.
on the call with Queen and we talking about it. She said, all right, sis, so it's gonna be $250 to start. And I was like, Queen, well, I don't have it. And she said, well, beloved, when you do, call me back. And I was just like, oh, my heart, right? But that was the first time that it was like, okay, if you want to do something, you got to get serious and you got to invest in yourself to do it. She has to hold, she has standards that she has to hold to, and so do you. And
Now,
so
talk to me like we're not sacred sisters, and just explain on the record for research purposes what when you say you found Sacred Woman and you're speaking about Queen of Fool. What is this? Is this another
absolutely.
spiritual religious system?
So yes,
Okay.
right. Sacred Woman is a rites of passage program started by Queen Afua back
Ah.
in the, I guess you could say, 1980s.
Mm.
And she has developed a program through extensive research that's based on the ancient Kemetic system. And
Okay.
in this program, there are 12 gateways associated with ancient Kemetic guardians that are connected to specific areas of the woman that allows you to deep dive into the things that have happened to you and give you the tools to help you overcome them and start anew. And in this
Mm-hmm.
program, you have the opportunity to kind of cleanse your palate and reset. Um, and this was my first full on experience into any type of African spirituality whatsoever.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and so I did not start that program right away, but the following year, when I saw Queen offering it again, I called right up and I was just like, here's my card, sign me up. Um, and this was at the peak of like the relationship finally ended. I was in pieces. I was just feeling I was within the shell of myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I was just like I feel like I have to do this because if I'm gonna follow the order of the steps, this feels right. So let me do this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I did this program, and I'll be honest with you, the program is let's say 16 weeks because the first 3 weeks you're still in one chapter.
Mm-hmm.
The first 4 weeks, I didn't turn my camera on. It was virtual. It was at the peak of the pandemic, so
Mm.
everything was virtual. Like let's say it was later, 2020. I didn't turn my camera on for 4 weeks. Everybody
Wow.
was participating. Everybody was doing all the things, and I did not turn my camera on. I did not come off of mute for 4 weeks because I think I was dealing with imposter syndrome and like, is this what I'm really supposed to be doing? How can I step
Mm.
into this space with all these women? All of these women have so much beautiful spirits about themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
then the fifth week, they have two mentors. One of the mentors guided us through a meditation. And I already had a foundation of meditation. So when
Mm-hmm.
she led us through it, I went deep. And when I went deep, when everybody came out, one of the women on the call, her niece was having like a panic or anxiety attack in the other room, and she didn't know. But I told her I was picking up on it, and I was describing the person, and I'm like, somebody here, XYZ ABCD, and she's just like, hold on. And she ended up going to the other room, and her niece was having a full on meltdown, and she didn't know, right? And so
Wow.
when we went through that call, and I came out of my shell, but the mentor who led the meditation, told me to stay on. And when I stayed on, she was like, you're going to be a practitioner. And I was like, oh, I thought about it. She said, oh no, it wasn't a question. Like,
What is a practitioner? What does that mean?
so, to be a practitioner in Sacred Woman means that you go back through the program, but you go through it with intentions of being able to mentor and teach other women. You get the official
Um,
blessing of Queen Afua, being trained by her,
mhm.
to carry her work on, either within your own circles or within the circles that she provides, because the
Right.
cohorts that you learn are called circles.
Okay.
And so she told me that she didn't care what else I did, but I would be a mentor in that program, and I would need to
Mhm.
figure it out because there's no
Mhm.
way that I cannot share my gifts with any, like I cannot keep it to myself. Um,
How did it feel? And I don't know about the racial background or anything with the Catholic upbringing, but how did your spirit feel being in this African centered wholly African centered environment container?
um,
How did
in
it
this
feel?
space, it felt like I could finally exhale.
Okay.
And when I didn't even realize I was holding my breath.
Mm.
Um, I felt free to talk about rituals and ceremonies and practices and herbs and things that in other spaces are taboo, but I was always curious about. Um, and for someone to, the minute that I stepped out of my box, snatched me up and was like, baby, what you're not about to do is play small anymore. Um,
Mhm.
it felt really good to be seen in that way. And she is the reason that I became a practitioner.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah. And so I went through that journey. And when you're going through Sacred Woman, you are invited to select a gateway that wasn't the easiest for you, but you felt yourself transforming the most. And there are 12 different guardians. Um, the one that I resonated with is Sekhmet, and Sekhmet is not for the faint of heart, um, but neither am I.
Mhm.
And I was able to connect with her, and I saw so much of myself in her, but I also saw that she can be, if her energy can be one of chaos and destruction if not handled with care. And I recognize that that's something that existed in me too.
Mhm.
And I started learning how to honor that without burning everything down to the ground.
Mhm.
Right? I learned how to build tools on how to develop and how to add notches to my like self care belt, if you will, or my social emotional belt, if you will, to be able to regulate. And so then when I went through the process of becoming a practitioner, that's how I was able to like um, connect with my cohorts the way that I did, because I was still feisty, right?
Mhm.
But I was able
Mhm.
to do it with a level of love and affirmation, that let them know that I'm 10 toes down for them, but you are also going to be 10 toes down for yourself. And
Mhm.
I was very unapologetic about it. And I was very like, assertive
Mhm.
and intense in my approach, but I still, with that same level of intensity, I still pulled in and like poured an enormous amount of love. And Sacred Woman opened the gates for me to live that version of me out loud and unapologetically, because before that
Mhm.
I felt like I had to hide the entertainment down because it was too much for other people. And Sacred Woman helped me kind of remove some of those barriers I created for myself.
If I am speaking as a um research statistician, if you want, I am hearing something and it's so significant that I have to acknowledge it. It sounds like you emerged into this level of leadership in the sacred woman system,
Uh-huh.
but it was different for you in this sacred woman environment from when you were in the leadership position, because we talked about being in leadership in the small church and
Yeah,
that you rejected that
I
and you
did.
were like absolutely not, right? And it sounded like from one environment to another is like a completely different way of receiving it. So I want to acknowledge that and feel free to respond. But we're gonna wrap up soon. I also want to ask you, like, if you could have recharted your spiritual journey,
Mhm.
what stage would you have put this stuff that you got later on? Where would you have placed that in your journey, from before?
Right where I received it. Because if it had shown up earlier, I wouldn't have taken it seriously. I still would have been
Mm,
stubborn and in my own way. I still would not have been humbled enough to be open to understand that there's something bigger than me that I need to receive. Um,
mm,
there were elements of me that still needed to be cracked, so to speak, because I still was moving with ego before that.
mhm.
And it wasn't until my ego got shattered, all the elements that filled me up were shattered. And so I had no, like, the if I chose to do anything else but lean into this, would have probably gone insane. um and
Wow.
so um I was in a place where,
Leaning into the sacred woman, correct?
correct,
Okay.
correct,
Mhm.
correct, because I won't say I was desperate.
Mhm.
But I was definitely at my wits' end in terms of, I need something that is going to help me choose me.
Yes.
And Sacred Woman was that. And it influenced me so much because in this space, everybody is living the walk, right? They're
Yes.
walking the walk, they're talking the
Yes.
talk,
Yes.
right? In the church, you see so many people um, being hypocrites. They're telling you to do something, but yet they have scandalous things going on in their life, and you're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
you telling me what to do, and you can't even get your pieces together.
Right.
And in this space, at least at that time, every single woman that I had come across, they had a story, and they were living this. They were showing us
Mm.
what it looked like to embody this in your everyday life, in their language and the way that they spoke. Um, you could see it on and off the camera, and that really shifted something in me, because I never wanted to be the type of person, or whether it's a coach, a practitioner, a mentor, that was telling you how to live your life, but I didn't have any examples for my own to show you.
Yeah.
And Sacred Woman helped model what that is.
Can I ask you, I'm gonna ask you this one question, then I'm gonna let you go because I know I'm running over into your next hour. And I know who you are. All right, give thanks and praise. I
Girl,
want
but
to
you,
know.
I just want you to know that I cleared my morning for this, because I knew
Oh,
that all this might not be able to fit in an hour. So if you have to
mhm.
go, great,
Yes.
but don't feel like you have to rush because of
Yeah.
me. Okay?
I don't even know why I did this to myself. I should have put 90 minutes talking to you because I knew, I mean, I knew factually. Okay. I don't even know why I did this. Um, and if I am able to squeeze on another chunk of time, I would definitely offer you that because it's just a rich, very rich experience. You having narrated this thus far. But my question is really about um what you got from this Sacred Woman program uh inside of the program. Like if you talked about knowing yourself, right? And
Yeah.
learn and being able to come into this with yourself. I'm curious about if we strip away the components of the program, is it the African, like is the African spirituality the portion of it? Was it some kind of self empowerment thing? Was it something about Queen Afua person? Like strip away the
think
components and tell me like
I, th- I
what's
think it was a
inside.
I think it was a combination of it all, right?
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think there was something beautiful about me being able to open a book and speak an ancient Kemetic language and sing it in song and chant and praise that activated something in me. It gave me somewhere to direct. It gave me routine, ritual, discipline. I enjoyed getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, going to my altar and praying. That filled me up. That gave me energy to push through.
mm-hmm,
Um, it gave me a new foundation into which I would grow my spirituality. Um, and there's some of the chants I didn't learn until I became a practitioner. And
mm-hmm,
so there are ones that you saw the words, right? But when I became a practitioner, I learned how to like chant them, and I
mm-hmm,
use them now, even though I am an Orisha practitioner now. I still use them to open any type of spiritual space because they just mean so much to me.
mm-hmm.
Um, I think without it sounding dramatic, I think Sacred Woman um, saved me from myself at a time where if I didn't choose that, I would have chose absolute destruction.
Wow. Thank you so much, Candace. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am gonna stop you because I feel like if I ask one more question, we are going to jump off this cliff. We're gonna be together. And that's gonna be it. And nobody's interview is gonna get done today but yours. That's it. But I want to thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
I want to thank you for allowing us to see you and really see you as the divine entity you are, see your spiritual journey, see how you have shown up, how you have found your way, stumbled through the dark, and found your way to this essence that you are embodying now.
Thank you.
Um, yes, so I am going to end our research interview, but I am going to also um, leave details in the description because this is on YouTube. I'm going to leave details as well for
Okay.
any other questions, if that's
Okay.
okay, for any
Yeah,
questions.
that's
Okay.
totally, totally, totally okay.
Yeah.
Totally okay.
Thank you, sis.
Um, you're very welcome
Thank you.
anytime.